Point in our program, we'll have our main talk. Our main speaker this week is Hunter White, who is a born and raised Houstonian, and he is with Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, and is here to talk a little bit about that today.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Hunter White, and I'm the Communications Director of Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. We are a 501c4 political nonprofit dedicated to the reform of both state and federal marijuana policy. A little bit about myself. Born and raised Houstonian, just graduated from South Texas College of Law, and I'm hoping to use my law degree to further our mission. So I'm here today to really talk about two big topics. The first one is what occurred at the Republican State Convention a few weeks back in San Antonio in regards to marijuana policy. And the second half will basically be about what that means for this next legislative session and reform in the state more generally. So, to begin, a few weeks ago was the Republican State Convention. If any of y'all don't know, when you go to vote in the primaries, if you stay there when the polls close, y'all have a little meeting, precinct meeting. From there, people put resolutions that get voted on. If they get voted on, they go up to the Senate district, and from there to the state. These are basically proposed changes that the party should adopt. And thankfully, through the help of, well, hundreds of activists across the state, we managed to get resolutions for marijuana reform onto the Republican State Party platform. Now, what do those reforms mean and what are they? So, as I'm sure many of y'all are aware, the Republican Party is sometimes a little slow when it comes to adopting social change issues. So, we took that in mind, and the resolutions that we put forward were small-scale steps to make Texas bring us up to date with the rest of the country. The first resolution that was passed was calling on our state legislators to expand and to fix the flaws in the Texas Compassionate Use Act. I know it's crazy, you probably wouldn't think it, but Texas actually has a medical marijuana program. We passed it in 2015. It's called the Texas Compassionate Use Act. Unfortunately, it's not that compassionate. The only people who are able to access it at the moment are those with intractable epilepsy. There's about 5,000 people with intractable epilepsy in the state. There's about 500 that are actually in the program. That's not a lot of people that are going to be helped. But it was a step. Texas adopted a medical program, and we even had Abbott sign it. That was good. When 2015 rolled around, we wanted to seize on that momentum and try and get a more expansive program, one that would cover conditions like PTSD, cancer, MS, ALS, chronic debilitating conditions that there's a lot of research saying that medical marijuana could help. Unfortunately, while we did end up getting more than half of the House on board with this bill, including, amazingly, 39 Republicans, it failed to pass. The bill came up for a floor vote on the last day of the session and was unfortunately killed as an effort to stop other bills that were going to be voted on that day. But we were very happy because that basically told us it can pass. We had the votes we needed in the House. So we got to work with the state party. The call for expanding the Compassionate Use Act is very simple. It merely states that the party supports an expansion to the program and it supports doctors deciding what conditions can be helped. And that passed with 83% of the delegates in favor. That's amazing because if you can get 83% of Republicans to agree on something, it's a big deal. So, that was very good. The next bill that we got, or the next resolution we got on the platform was a call to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. We live in a great city, and we have a fantastic DA at the moment, DA Kim Ogg. And one of her campaign issues was that she was going to implement essentially a diversion program to stop arresting people for minor possession. At this point, it has saved the city of Houston about $25 million a year, and it is something. And it is a program that is now being looked at to be adopted in Dallas and also Fort Worth. In fact, all of Texas's major metropolitan areas have adopted some kind of diversion program or cite and release program for minor possession. And at this point, that's more than half the Texas population. And our idea was we need to stop arresting people in the state. Your zip code shouldn't dictate what criminal offenses you could possibly get. And so, with 81% of the delegates, they approved decriminalization on the Republican Party platform. The next resolution, the third one, should not have had any controversy. It's actually been on the Republican Party platform since the 90s, oddly enough. A call to expand the access to industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is a fantastic product. You can't use it to get high. It's not medicine. It's literally an industrial product. And since the 90s, we have consistently gotten that on the Republican Party platform, and we managed to do that again with 81% of the delegates. The last resolution is important because it kind of gets to the heart of this whole problem with, well, this country's view on marijuana. It calls for the federal government to reschedule marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. In 1970, the Controlled Substance Act was passed by Congress. It created a scheduling system of drugs, and Schedule 1 are drugs that have no medical value, incredibly physically and mentally addictive, and cannot be safely administered at all. And marijuana is on that list. Yet, oddly enough, methamphetamine and cocaine are Schedule 2 drugs. So we can kind of tell right off the bat there's something fishy about this list. Well, unfortunately, Congress has not updated that list in about 30 years. They delegated their authority to the DEA to decide that. And, well, the DEA, by statute, has to oppose all changes to the controlled substance list. This essentially means that we're kind of in a regulatory circle here where Congress won't change the law and the only body that can't. So, by making this call for Congress to change the controlled substance list, we are hoping that that will spark a change which, at this point, 47 states have adopted some kind of reform. So it's about time that Congress got on board. So that's what we got done in the state convention. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about what that's going to mean for the next session, for this upcoming election, and things to just keep in mind. All of the resolutions that we got passed on the state platform correspond with bills that have been introduced in the legislature for about the past 8 years. Texas we've constantly tried to pass decriminalization. That's the work of Rep. Joe Moody out of El Paso, fantastic former prosecutor who saw the horrors of the drug war himself and wanted to have that changed. The platform position calling for decriminalization is a mirror image of his bill. And now with the party on board, and since last session, 43 people who are going to be co-sponsors, it looks like we very well could see decriminalization in Texas. What would that look like? Well, it would decriminalize the possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana. It wouldn't make it not a crime. Instead, we would amend our penal code to add a new section of crimes called civil offenses. You see, in Texas, even your basic traffic violation is a crime. You're basically committing a misdemeanor. Now, it's a Class C, but it's a crime nonetheless. You get a record. Well, with Joe Moody's bill, we would no longer have a class of crimes for possession of small amounts of marijuana. Instead, you would be legally obligated to pay a $100 fine, and if you didn't, you would face a criminal offense for not paying. The important part here, though, is that you do not get a drug conviction. If you are unaware, there are many, many negative repercussions that come with a conviction, but especially a drug conviction. You lose access to federal housing. You lose access to lots of federal benefits, student loans, and tons of state programs. And that shouldn't happen. With Joe Moody's bill, it wouldn't. And now that we have the Republican Party on board, and we know that we have the votes in the House, we feel that 2019 will be the year Texas decriminalizes. The next bill that we will see in the legislative session, I will say, will most likely be the one that will be passed. It is the expansion to the Texas Compassionate Use Act. Mirroring the language that is in the Republican Party platform, it would essentially expand our limited program, which right now, once again, only covers those with intractable epilepsy, to more conditions. Now, when I say more conditions, I'm not talking about something like how California's medical system used to work. We're not talking a quasi-recreational system. Texas is not going to get on board with that just yet. But what we will do is expand the program to more conditions, and by expanding the program to more conditions and getting more people in the program, the price of the medicine will drop. It's basic economics. Unfortunately, as I said, there's about 500 people in the program currently. There are 3 businesses that have the exclusive license to grow and sell. 500 people is not enough to make an economically feasible business, especially when the state requires about $1.5 million to actually apply for a license you're not guaranteed to get. At the moment, the medicine for those with intractable epilepsy costs about $5,000 a month. That's uninsurable, by the way. That's $5,000 cash you need to pay. Part of the reason why it's so expensive is because there's not a lot of people in that program. And there basically can't be, because there's not a lot of people with that condition. By expanding the program so that more people can get access to a medicine we know that works, the price will drop as more people will be there to support the system. We know that this bill will have more than half the House in support. The important part will be what will happen in the Senate. As I'm sure everybody is aware, Texas is quite a red state, and things do not get done unless the Republican Party wants it to get done in this state. Now, that's fine and good for your rank-and-file members in the House. Lots of great politicians there who work across the aisle, work on the issues. But unfortunately, there's a contingent of very ardent conservatives who are positioned around our lieutenant governor, who controls the Senate, who are opposed to this. If it can't pass the Senate, it can't happen. So, what we need to do is very simple. Reach out to these people. Make sure they know it's on their party platform calling for this expansion. Let them know it's not some scary boogeyman, not some reefer madness. And basically keep that pressure on them. A phone call, an email. That simple when the session's in. And we only have 6 months to do it, so, time's of the essence. But that's when 2019 rolls around. Now, the next thing that we will see come up in the session will be a industrial hemp bill. Once again, not very controversial. Everyone knows industrial hemp's this fantastic agricultural product. And oddly enough, for the past 12 years, it's unanimously passed out of the Agriculture Committee. Nobody opposing it, nobody speaking out against. But it manages to never reach the floor for a vote. We're not sure why, but we know partially that there is a reticence to use industrial hemp because, well, people in executive agencies like our agriculture commissioner think that it's a front for legalization. Now, of course, it's not, but that's the kind of propaganda and mentality that we're having to fight. Big things to keep in mind as November rolls around. Of course, we have the general election. It's a midterm, so turnout's not going to be the highest in the world, but there are important races that we need to be aware of. Probably the biggest one for this state currently is going to be the race for our Texas senator. Currently, we have Senator Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, when he ran for president, stated a position on marijuana, which he has not wavered on, and that is that it should be left up to the states to decide what they want to do. At this point, that's basically a status quo answer. That's been the policy of the government, either directly or indirectly, for about 20 years. It's not the worst position in the world to have. It's also not the best. And it is also important to keep in mind that Senator Cruz holds very important positions in the Senate on important committees, and yet has not signed on to any of the reform bills that have been put forward by his own party, people like Senator Rand Paul, Senator Cory Gardner out of Colorado, and has not put forward his own legislation either. It appears that he is committed to his position of, let the states decide, I'm not going to do anything about it. As you know, his competitor is Representative Beto O'Rourke. Beto has been an ardent champion of ending the drug war. He actually wrote a book about it and has what would be termed very progressive views about how the drug war should be dealt with in this country, namely that we probably need to end it. Mass incarceration's horrible. Those are good positions to have. And while it's a long shot race, it's been very encouraging to see that this issue, marijuana reform, medical marijuana, the status of marijuana on the federal government, has actually become an issue. They actually compete with each other about their positions. And that's an encouraging thing to see. So, when November rolls around, make sure to look into where your candidates stand on this issue. Vote on the issues, not on the ideology. Every time you vote for the ideology and not the issues, you tell people it's okay to not care about it. It's okay to have this bad position because I'm going to overlook it. The important thing is to look at where they stand, look at their positions, and most importantly, vote your conscience. And my last word on the elections is pay attention to your down-ballot votes. People often overlook judges, DA positions, council people, because they're not as important or cool as your representatives or senators. But reform can happen very easily on the local level if you elect the right people. It's a matter of trying to figure out where they stand. And so that is really what we can expect in this next legislative session. A repeat of the last session, the bills, but this time with more support from the party itself. And hopefully, with that, Texas will. Well, hopefully, like that bird, Texas will soon be free.
I had a question. When you were talking about the policy for decriminalization that your organization has, where it would be not a criminal act to have small amounts of marijuana, but you would be given a fine, and if you did not pay that fine, it would become a criminal act. Do you all have a plan, or is there an acknowledgement that that would disproportionately disadvantage people of lower income and allow for sort of a different application to the law to people of means versus people without that much money?
So your question's kind of spot on here, because I kind of agree. I really do agree. The idea of making a fine system like that really does kind of create a two-level system for those who can afford and those who can't. Unfortunately, $100 was about the lowest we could get the legislator to actually accept. Rep. Moody has worked for years trying to get his, especially the more conservative members of the House, on board with it, and that was the lowest number that we could get him. Now, I do know, though, that, for example, when Houston introduced the diversion program, those caught with minor possession, they had to pay for a class to basically have the arrest go away. That class was about $150, and so what the city did, because, once again, Kim Ogg is fantastic, they waived that fee for those who actually couldn't afford it. There will be discretion with how the prosecutors actually pursue this, and I would not be surprised if when that decriminalization gets passed, you will see DAs do the same thing, because I know they're prosecutors, but they are more aware than we think about how fines basically become debt traps. I mean, right now we're actually in the middle of a federal lawsuit about it for our, driver's license and insurance issues. So the city's very aware, the state's very aware, and I expect that you will see that the prosecutorial discretion used to kind of blunt the sharp end of that.
Hey, so that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. I was wondering if you could briefly speak about what are some of the effects that have led to this adoption of a decriminalization of marijuana on the Republican platform? And then also, what are some of the arguments that are against that? Why are some Republicans, particularly as you said in the Senate, resistant to that, and what might be convincing arguments to convince them?
But before you get that back, repeat the first part of your question one more time.
I was curious if you could briefly sort of give reason for why this has been adopted, why this change, right? This is to me, this is new information that I traditionally think Republicans have been against this, and so what has prompted this?
So that's a fantastic question. What prompted the state party to do this? Well, it was two things. One was very, very sick children. We have a fantastic group called MAMAs. That's Mothers Advocating Medical Marijuana for the Treatment of Autism. I think that's the acronym. And they have very, very severely autistic children. Them, together with the Epilepsy Foundation, specifically the parents who have children with intractable epilepsy, they were absolute troopers and basically camped out in the Capitol. And when you have very sick children in front of those legislators' faces, they can't not say yes. That's how we got medical, honestly. And that's really been more the winning issue, especially in the South, is seeing sick children helped. We have found that tying the message of the healing power of medical marijuana to something that traditionally conservative Republicans really care about, something like, like their pro-life stance or something like that, really kind of resonates with them, because once they start seeing that it's helping children, it's really hard for them to say, no, let the child die. So that's really been the medical aspect. On the decrim aspect, what's really been it is that the fiscal conservatives have started really winning the argument. It's oddly enough, the Democratic cities have really kind of paved the way for this. Once again, we saved millions of dollars in Houston by doing this diversion program. And while the more conservative counties around us responded very negatively to it, the state Republican Party really paid attention when they saw that savings. And so I think that the savings to the state has really kind of won them over on the decrim issue, especially because it's still technically illegal. So they can say, oh, we didn't do anything, crazy. We're just, being fiscally responsible. As far as the arguments against, I always use this analogy. It's like the Republican Party, or I should say the more conservative wings, are haunted by the ghost of Nancy Reagan. They cannot stop hearing just say no. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter what they see in other states. It doesn't matter that they see it helping people. It doesn't matter that they know that the criminal justice side of it is completely screwed up and disproportionately affects people of color, minority communities. They ignore it all because, just say no and that'll fix the issue. I will also say that there was we especially saw this at the convention, there's a contingent of people who seem to think that you don't need medicine to cure these kind of illnesses. It doesn't matter that marijuana helps you, because if you were a good person, this wouldn't happen to you. And that's really, really bad. But that mentality exists still. And we unfortunately ran into it. But what I will say is, from my time at the convention, about 70% of the 10,000 plus delegates, about 70% of the interactions we had were people all on board with it. And of, that last 30%, about 20 really just wanted more information. They were afraid we'd end up like California with quasi-recreational, and while that wouldn't be terrible in my book, for some people that's kind of scary. And so once we kind of alleviated that fear and told them how Texas is going to do their program, they jumped on board. That last 10% is the crazy one, though. But, there's always one.
All right, I've got a question over here.
Yes, sir.
I heard you say 80% of the Republicans agreed with your three positions, and I think of the Democrat Party as having a majority who support it, so I really don't understand if 80% of the Republicans and a majority of Democrats like these proposals, why doesn't it pass? And second question is, how do you get information on judges? You said look at the local judges to vote, and I never know information about how to know what their positions are.
Right. So I really do wish that the politics made more sense. So the state Democratic Party has actually had the positions we just got on the Republican Party platform for probably 20 years. So they've really kind of been ahead on the curve on this issue. And even so, while there is broad agreement that something needs to be done, they cannot come to an agreement about what. I think probably the best example of that is Congress. So once again, at this point, about 47 states have enacted some kind of reform of some kind. And of those, there's about 31 real medical states. And then of that number, 31, 17. Other ones, they have like CBD programs like we do, like limited medical programs. They just can't seem to agree on how to move forward. Everyone knows that we need to. Everyone knows that the Controlled Substance Act is wrong. Everyone knows that it needs to change, but nobody can really quite figure out whether we need to move it to Schedule 2, whether we need to move it off the controlled substance list. or really how to actually fix the criminal justice side. Because, for example, 72,000 Texans are arrested a year on average for minor possession. And if we wanted to adopt decriminalization, or in the future, hopefully recreational or something, that is going to be a massive number of people that we need to fix the criminal justice problem we created. And unfortunately, that requires a lot more than just a broad consensus that something needs to be done. Honestly, if I had to give my honest assessment on why nothing has happened yet, well, I guess it's because Congress is doing what Congress does best, which is nothing. And on the state level, we only meet 6 months every 2 years. So there's not, unless something gets done immediately and quickly, nothing gets done for about 2 years. And that just keeps getting compounded year after year after year. Yes. On the judges aspect, especially your down ballot races, your best friend is going to be Google. Find a provisional ballot. You can do that by just looking at, I think it's the Secretary of State's website.
harrisvotes.org.
There you go. Find those names and look at their campaign websites. If they don't have a website, or they have a website but it doesn't address your question, email them. Because sometimes they just never thought to actually put it on there. One thing specifically, though, to keep in mind about judges is they have a special rule of judicial ethics which makes it so that they're not able to advocate for certain positions, a violation of judicial ethics doing that. So just keep in mind that sometimes when they say they can't give you an answer, it's because, by election law and also by their ethics, they can't. But that's the easiest thing to do is Google or an email. Email, I find, is probably the best, but that's how I would do it.
Okay, and this is our last question. This is one that was written in by someone who wanted to remain anonymous, the name Helen M. They want to know, is your interest in reforming marijuana laws just something you're interested in politically, or do you or have you ever smoked jazz cabbage? If so, hold on, part two. If so, did you inhale?
So I will refrain to answer about the devil's lettuce. But what I will say is the reason I got involved in this issue is when I was in college up in Georgetown, Texas, there was an incident where a 19-year-old got picked up with a tray of marijuana brownies. Now, fun fact about how Texas weighs edibles, you weigh the entire amount, and that is considered all marijuana. So he had a tray of brownies. They weighed the pan and the tray and the brownies, and it came out to about 2 pounds. And he was facing a very serious felony. I heard about this, and my young, idyllic college self was like, that's not right. And so I started going to NORML meetings. If y'all don't know who NORML is, that's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. They basically do what RAMP does, but we focus on Republicans, where they focus on broader political groups. And I got involved after that. I also have a personal interest in it because I have a loved one who has essentially fibromyalgia, so rolling nerve pain in your extremities, as a result of nerve damage from Lyme's disease. And she couldn't find any relief. And when she found out that marijuana helped her, my thought was, why the hell are we not giving this to people to help? And I really wanted to get the medicine that worked for my loved one. So the criminal justice issue, the personal connection, and I will also say I think it's a fantastic plant, so we probably shouldn't be criminalizing that either.
Thank you so much. Will you be here after lunch?
Yes.
So if you have any other questions, yeah, we'll do that then. Thank you.